This is, I think, one of Fortune's formulas for sure, which is assemble the best group of people around you that's possible. That is Fortune's formula, and you could be starting a nonprofit, a for-profit, a startup, a student group or whatever, but just, you have to assemble incredible people around you that are going to complement you. And just that is, people are the fundamental units of what we're trying to do in this industry. I think it's easy to forget that. It's easy to lose sight of that. But that's when I've seen success compound over time, when I've seen success accumulate over time, it starts with that.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Mark Peter Davis, Managing Partner of Interplay Ventures. Today we have Peter Boyce on the show. He's a partner at General Catalyst, a very large venture capital fund based in the States. He's also the founder of Rough Draft Ventures, a program that helps student entrepreneurs. Peter's extremely well accomplished and has set himself apart from many of the VCs in the market. Today, he's going to explain how General Catalyst operates and what makes them unique, including the fact that they've won an Academy Award. He articulates how to improve entrepreneurship at colleges, and overall, I think this is a fun one. I made Peter blush at least 2 or 3 times during the show. I hope you enjoy. This episode is brought to you by Bowery Legal. Bowery Legal provides a complete range of legal services to high-growth companies. They do everything from formation, employment, partnership agreements, stock grants, corporate matters, and venture capital and debt financings. If you're interested in learning more, visit bowerylegal.com. Peter, thanks for being on the show.
Mark, thanks so much for having me.
All right, we have a lot to cover today. But before we get into General Catalyst, venture capital, and everything else, I want to hear a little bit about your story. Could we start off with where you're from?
Totally. I grew up in New York.
In the city?
Yeah, up in Washington Heights.
City kid.
Yeah, you know it. I've always been a little bit of like a kind of a computer geek. So, that's been really nice to kind of carry with me, through all these years. So grew up here. I was like the physics, summer camp kid, I went to Stuyvesant High School. Lots of stories I can tell you about, fixing computers, the public library and all that jazz.
How did you get into computers in the beginning? What was the beginning of your tech journey?
Yeah, honestly, the first thing I remember is, I was lucky to kind of walk down the street once, and I basically found someone had left like effectively almost like one of these like electronic kind of typewriters, you know what I mean? Like the precursors to proper desktops.
That's such a New York story.
Honestly. And I took it home and I was kind of like, oh my Lord, this is like, I don't even know what to do with this, but I like it. You know what I mean? I like the digital screen and all that jazz. And then, fast forward a few years later, I just remember getting our first desktop. And I remember the process of, kind of putting it together and turning it on and using it. It was like, it enveloped me, you know what I mean? Like the rest is history. Like I was just fascinated with downloading new apps and, all that jazz. And it morphed over time, it's like it went from, the, LimeWire, you know what I mean? And all that kind of, BitTorrent and all that jazz to then, modding Xboxes and then, it kind of all spiraled from there.
Were you power user or coder?
Power user. Thank you for asking that. Yeah, I was power user growing up. Ended up studying, computer science at Stuyvesant and a little bit in college. But I've always just been just fascinated by the tool and the utility, of computers and what technology does for us. So I would say definitely a power user. And I also love the side project and hobbies, you know what I mean, of technology. I like building computers. I liked selling them to other people. I liked setting up people's home networks and all that jazz. My first, I'm not even sure I'd call it a business, but I basically started like a little computer consulting business in high school. I called it Sty Guy Computer Services. Amazing. And it was literally just like helping people, install new versions of Windows, you know what I mean? And like fixing home networks. So.
And did you think about being a founder? It sounds like you had a little bit of the entrepreneurial bone. Is that something you ever contemplated?
It's interesting. I've definitely, that expression founder definitely came to me later in life. It's like, that wasn't, in high school, it was more like, this is my passion.
hustling.
This is the way,
Just making
yeah,
some
you know
money.
what I mean? Yeah, I'm like working at the public I'm working at my school library. You know, I'm having fun with friends, learning a lot, just tinkering. But I think now, you know what I mean? Now it definitely feels a little bit more like that. Like that was the spirit, you know what I mean? Of just creating things, getting people involved, helping other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent a lot of my time in college, you know, founding student groups and helping friends found companies. And so,
Mm-hmm.
you know, but again, it was that nomenclature really emerged later on for me.
Now, Peter, I've known you for a while, but I've done a little research on you for this conversation to get to know you a little bit better.
Oh no.
I think you're a very driven guy, right? I think that's a big part of your narrative, and I know that might be a little embarrassing to have someone tell you, but I think it's probably true. There's a line that I caught on you, which is you were taking math and physics at Columbia University while you were still in high school. What motivates you? I mean, that's pretty. Even if you're capable of doing it, which is impressive enough, schlepping around, commuting, the effort. What motivates a guy like you to do the things that you do?
Yeah. Geez, it's a combination of a few things, Mark. And I'm you know, blushing, you know, a little bit. You know what I mean? For sure.
You are. It's great.
I don't blush that much these days.
Well, hopefully a little bit more before we're done.
You know, motivation for me. I mean, look, part of it is just curiosity and just internal fuel to just discover things and learn more. Like that's always been a proclivity of mine, and I follow it. You know what I mean? I don't reject it. You know what I mean? I don't pretend it's not there. I just follow it, you know? And for some folks that takes them into sports, journalism, you know what I mean? But for me, it's just reading, physics, math, computers, you know what I mean? Like I just followed it. And I think I got comfortable, you know, with basically just pursuing that, realizing like that's who I was. I was like always the kid that kind of looked up at the night sky and was just kind of like, there's something bigger, there's something really interesting happening here. And you could spend a lot of time, you know, in life trying to discover what those things are, and it would take you really interesting places. So I think that's one, you know, that's a, you know, big piece of it for me. The second is circumstance, right? Like, you know, for better or for worse, I kind of came to the conclusion that education and pursuing educational opportunities to the fullest was how you created opportunities, optionality, and change your life. And it was under my control, right? I, you know, there's some things that we can change. There's some things we can't change, but I could certainly elect to not watch TV after school and schlep up to Columbia to get beat down. You know what I mean? Taking quantum mechanics with Brian Greene. You know what I mean? Like I could choose to do that, right? And so I think that's the second piece. And I've always put a huge premium and priority instead of importance around education. And I'm lucky that, you know, a fair amount of that came from my parents and just observing them and observing just, you know, the society we're embedded in. So I think that's the second piece. And then the third is I find all of this to be really fun. And I know, awesome. You know, and it's like in high school, that's called being a geek or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, but I find this stuff to be so fun. You know what I mean? Like writing equations for me in high school was like the time of my life. And now, you know what I mean? Like just working with founders and thinking about the future technology. I love this stuff. It's super fun and fulfilling. So that's the positive feedback loop.
A lot of people, I think, in the innovation economy find themselves lucky to actually like their job.
Oh, it's a blessing.
What's the magic at Harvard, right? We've had incredible entrepreneurs come out of there, obviously Zuckerberg and Gates and many, many others. Is there some secret sauce to the way the programming is done and the community is constructed? Or is it, since it's just one of the best schools out there, that really great people go there and really great people do really great things? Yeah. Is Harvard creating this, or are they working with people who are predestined?
Yeah. Such a fascinating question. I mean, I would start by saying, you know, I'm incredibly grateful for the experience that I had to study and be at Harvard, because I don't think you and I would be chit-chatting today if it weren't for that opportunity. So I mean,
hell, you were at Columbia in high school. I think you would have been somewhere fine.
Totally true. I would have tried my best, that's for sure. So, but that gratitude and kind of, you know, recognition is something that I carry with me every day. But here's actually what I would say. I actually think, you know, there are so many campuses that have tremendous entrepreneurial excellence. And that's one of the things that I spent a lot of my time dedicated to discovering, connecting, and being a part of. So, I'm going to trace back to getting to the core of your question, but I want to start by saying, some of my most favorite entrepreneurial friends and founder narratives came from campuses, far and wide, beyond the one where I was lucky to study. And for what it's worth, I spent my senior year founding Rough Draft to really connect those dots, because I really wanted to kind of create a constellation of entrepreneurs across all these campuses, because whether it's Columbia or Pomona or UT Austin or UMich or MIT, every campus has these pockets of entrepreneurs, and we either tell their stories or don't, and they happen at different volumes. So that's what I would say, right? So the Facebook story, as a result of its order of magnitude and how the ways in which the story has been told, there's a strong association. But Max Levchin, University of Illinois, who talks about that, not as much, but it's like, there are so many. But
he's very successful.
Yeah. So many schools can, engineer these really amazing powerhouses in our industry. So, but all that to say, I think it is a little bit of this kind of like this, like, I almost think of it as the admissions office has this opportunity to kind of create, like, it's like Dr. Xavier's, you know what I mean? Like, school for the special, right? And I think there's a little bit of that, kind of magic that happens behind the scenes, but a lot of it is also just, it's serendipity, it's luck. And I think increasingly today, though, I think one of the things that I find very exciting is universities are spending more time coming up with ways to engineer more entrepreneurship. And that's something that, if we were having this conversation 15 years ago, it'd be dramatically different. Like, if you were a founder on a campus, you were doing so by your own volition, right? Like, now there's classes, there's communities, there's competitions, there's funding. So overall, our net kind of, output of founders across universities is rising, and it's not isolated to any 1, 2, or 5 universities. So anyway, that's something I could talk all day about, given the work.
Let's talk about it, because that's how I think we actually initially connected. Right, you were doing university entrepreneurship. For those who are listening who don't know, I started the Columbia Venture Community for Columbia University and the Duke Venture Community for Duke University. And I think you were running some of your entrepreneurial outreach at university levels. And we had connected through that, I think, very early on in your career. I'm a little bit older than you. Unfortunately, a lot older than you. I'm getting really old. But no, I think we had connected on that. You have gone far beyond what most people have done, what I have done on the university side, right? So you did the work at Harvard. I noticed you're also involved with some programs at Northwestern, MIT. You've got the Rough Draft Ventures program, which I'd like you to actually give everyone the headline of what that is. But there's a bigger story around university entrepreneurship where I think you are helping to build a launching pad for people around the country. And I think it's worth hearing, and I want to grab some lessons out of it. So first, do you mind giving a little overview on Rough Draft?
Yeah, totally. So this is, I'm in senior year bucket list mode, and I'm like, I've got one last year to make another impact where I can on campus. And to the points I was sharing earlier, I was just super excited about this opportunity to find the other pockets of entrepreneurs on other campuses. And I'd known some of them. And there are other incredible communities that I was a part of that were getting started, like Interact and others that were starting to connect the dots. But I was kind of like, wow, it would be really great if, number one, we could create a community of these founders across all these different universities. Number two, it would be great if we could provide them their first capital, right? Their first resourcing, right? Again, back to the humble beginnings piece that we touched on for a little bit. I mean, Mark, I don't know about you. Not everyone has a, uncle that's going to come out of the woodwork and write the $25K check for them.
No, they don't.
Right? Not everyone has that. God bless those that do. That's awesome. But if you have a great idea, huge ambition, you know what I mean? And don't want to, bury your, kind of family and credit card debt and, all that jazz, like, you should be able to access resources to take a chance and start a business. And I can go on and on about how and why the risk curve for entrepreneurship for folks of all different socioeconomic backgrounds needs to change and the ways that we can influence that. But this is the way that was super apparent to me, the first check. And then the third was, well, what would happen if you built a set of just mentorship and resources, around this, not as formally structured as a program like an accelerator where you have a finite period of time and you physically go somewhere, but how do you get access to the playbook for company creation? How do you get those lessons that are, I'm very glad now they're in great proliferation. But like if you were, what you think about like, Nate from Airbnb, starting his first companies, when he was on campus, there wasn't, structured mentorship programs and blog posts, illuminating the way. So there's still kind of area to contribute there. So anyway, all that to say, that was the founding thesis for Rough Draft is, how to deliver on those three things. And so I was very lucky to co-found it with the team at General Catalyst. I spent more of my senior year, I think, hanging out in the office and working with the team at GC closely to get this up and off the ground. And we started in the Boston area. And since then, we've expanded across the country, across schools. And
how many schools are now in the program? And can you give some bullets on what the program does?
Yeah,
you mentioned First Check, but what's the rest of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, with Rough Draft, it's funny. I think about, not to be morbid, but I think about, what my, tombstone, might read. And honestly, I'm so lucky and I feel so privileged that I think so much of it would read, about just the impact that we've had with Rough Draft, just because I think at the end of the day, some of these companies may or may not have existed at all, like in this version of the universe that we live in, right? Like folks could have taken the job at Palantir or Facebook and Google.
Right.
Instead, they took a chance, they got together with friends. So anyway, all that to say, so the model is we recruit a team of student venture fellows from across our universities where we work. So this year, working in a distributed environment, we've had the most venture fellows we've ever had, because we're not meeting up in person. So we now have 50 venture fellows, from across the country. So, from Duke to Stanford, everywhere. It's just, it's incredible. So we're taking advantage and leaning into, some of the things that you can do in a distributed environment that we couldn't do before, because before it was nice to get everyone together in a room to chit chat about companies. So we have these incredible venture fellows, and they are the native connectivity to these entrepreneurs on their campuses. So the founders, that they're their classmates, they're their best friends, they're their, fraternity and sorority sisters and brothers. So anyway, empowering them to find ways to support the founders in their ecosystem. That's what Rough Draft is about. So we write initial checks anywhere between $25,000 and $250,000 to kind of help get these founding teams into business. We connect them with mentors. We connect them with other sources of capital. And we also create this sense of community across the founders. So one of the things we find is, when you connect all these communities together, all these founders together, there's cross-pollination, there's introductions made, there's co-founders that are found. We've hosted events where, literally like two folks find each other, build a company. I'm just kind of like,
amazing,
engineering that. So yeah, we've backed now, well over 250 companies. And we've been, super lucky to see. I've lost track, of how many jobs have been created by our portfolio companies. But it's been, effectively, billions of dollars, of enterprise value, hundreds of millions of dollars, raised, and we're still getting started. It's still nascent. So, yeah.
So the venture fellows, do they have the control over the investment decision making, or do they bubble it up to you and the team to evaluate? How does that work?
Yeah, this is something that's really important. I think, I anchor a lot of the decisions around my, talk about aging and starting to lose one's memory, but I anchor a lot of our program around, the experience that I and other students had on campus, right? And so I think a big part of that is feeling empowered and enabled. And so our venture fellows work, in so many ways to lead in the discovery efforts, to the founders that they're going to work with. And it's really, I play a mentorship role. I advise, I help ask questions, But the ethos and the spirit and the magic and the energy comes from empowering and enable our venture fellows. And so that's the model. That's what we do. And one of the other things that I would say that's powerful that's emerged is these venture fellows, end up going on to be founders themselves.
Sure.
They're partners at venture firms, Like they just kind of go off and do great things in the community. And so we stay connected with them that way too.
So one of the things when I hear this model, I'm thinking about this is a great social service, a great way to empower entrepreneurs, a great way to educate the next generation, a great way to level the playing field. Does it generate returns
Hmm.
when you're investing in, by and
Yeah.
large, people who don't have a lot of business experience?
Yeah.
Has it been a profitable venture?
Yeah. So it's funny. This is where, when folks say, kind of follow your passion, and everything else will emerge.
Yeah.
This is one of those, right? So you could have used that as like a stumbling block to basically prevent a concept from like this ever coming to fruition, right? And
Sure.
you'd be totally justified in doing that. I mean, we have portfolio companies that are, again, it's billions of dollars of enterprise value that's created. I mean, I think that the thing that I would highlight and underscore here, and this is one of the things that drives me, is young people and early career entrepreneurs can do so much by leveraging a few of their key advantages, right? So when I think about specialization, it's oftentimes you get unbounded imagination, right? So Patrick and John Collison had unbounded imagination around how to rewrite, financial infrastructure of the internet. They didn't need to work at Visa or Amex or anywhere else to get exposed to that unbounded imagination. In fact, chances are, had they worked at those places, they would have had bounded imagination, right? So anything they would have created may have been incremental, right? And that works in certain environments. You get enterprise software, great. I worked at Oracle for 10 years. This thing needs to exist, so I'm going to go. But sometimes, to have like something that feels like just totally like net new for society, oftentimes just unbounded imagination and creativity is what gets it done. And you have that as a student, right? You have that. So, and I'm like obsessed with being around that. Like I get chills when I get the sense that someone has that. You know what I mean? Like that's what kind of keeps me going. So that's one. Two is, access to these ridiculously, high quality, high integrity recruiting networks, right? Like, I mean, you can literally, assemble a team of your smartest friends and smartest engineers, you know what I mean? And you can do so in ways that are very fluid today, right? Like you can discover those folks. And now it's like with Slack and all these other communities and Discord and others, I mean, there's even more connectivity. So I think the barriers to team building, you know what I mean, have kind of come down. And I think there's special advantages to students because they know how to self-organize. They've got mailing lists, they've got all these communities. So that's the second piece. And then I think the third, for what it's worth, is there's a, how do I put this? A humble and openness to learning and self-improvement. It's something I look for in every entrepreneur that I have the privilege of working with, and something that I try to embrace and adopt myself. But when you're constantly learning from your professors, from founders that you meet on the internet, and from YouTube videos and all that jazz, that sponge-like learning machine dynamic is available to 16-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 50-year-olds, 100-year-olds. So it's available to all of us. And because it's available to all of us, the folks that choose to take it on and over-index and over-invest in it can go a tremendous way. And now that there's that much content and learning and best practices in entrepreneurship, I mean, I'm waiting, you know what I mean, for the $1 billion companies that are going to be created by 16-year-olds. It's not an if, it's a when. So anyway, all of that to say, billions of dollars of enterprise value created with our rough draft portfolio companies. And these entrepreneurs that start out as students they are world-class.
I think the program is magnificent. And even if the answer to my question that I'm going to ask you again is no, I think it should exist.
Oh,
let me say that.
Sorry.
Let me hold your feet to the fire. If you put $1 into Rough Draft Ventures, are you up?
Yes.
Okay,
great. You're in a good spot. Trust me.
Great. I love that, because that's what I hope. Right? You want to believe that, right? Because you want the math to draw more capital to support that program.
Well,
that program is more than just returns. It's training the future.
Mark, I think that's right. And this is like, life gives you, only so many win-win-wins. You know what I mean?
Right.
This is one of them. And we're going to see more universities get involved here. We're going to see more venture funds get involved here. There already is a history of that, right? Like I think YC and Pair and other programs have done a great job backing incredible young people early on. I think there are going to be, an order of magnitude more case studies like Patrick and John, and HubSpot and Snap, and we can talk about, how and why there should just be so much more of that. I think it's really, really exciting. It's been a big part of our identity and success and DNA at GC and at other venture firms. And so, and I think you're just going to see more universities, getting involved and encouraged and kind of connect the dots on this too. So this is not going away. Entrepreneurship is important.
A lot of universities are trying to figure out how to invigorate entrepreneurial communities. I feel like this really started after '08. Everyone was trying to find a way to weasel their way into Wall Street, get their students in to get the big paying jobs because it helped all the stats. And then Wall Street collapsed and it's come back. But I think a lot of the universities woke up and realized they needed to diversify while Wall Street was recovering. And I started hearing, '09, entrepreneurship was every campus's new mission. What tips do you have as a guy who's actually made it work? What tips do you have for people who are running programs at universities? What should they be doing to create the type of right environment to support people, to give people a chance?
Yeah. It's something I'm a perpetual student, of our industry. And I learned so much by, seeing what's working, what's not working, and trying experiments. So, any answer that I would share is the product of, seeing, incredible universities and venture firms do things and paying attention to what seems to be working, what's not, and then running my own set of experiments and trying to contribute to this. And I'm excited that, in 10 years, my answer is going to be out of date and executed on, which is great. So
that'll be great.
That's going to be important.
That'll be better for the whole country and the whole world.
Yeah, no, it's, finding ways to enable young people to define the future of technology that's our opportunity, and it's shown incredible results so far. So, but here's what I would say. In terms of kind of, structured and engineered ways to enable, kind of greater kind of entrepreneurship that leads to, really big ideas and interesting company creation. I think first and foremost is creating classes and curriculum for air cover for folks to enable the time and have an environment where they can have that air cover to work on their companies and work on their ideas. This is something, I would love to see a time series of curricula, of different computer science and other programs. Some universities 20 years ago, there wasn't, an intro to CS class that had more than 10 people in it, right?
Sure.
So I think that's one. So, and that's something that universities have control over, like remarkable control over. And of course, there's always, complexity. Are we going to, are there going to be finals in this class or not? But,
right.
I would look at symbolic systems at Stanford as just a case study for just, hey, by the way, structure it this way. The team from Instagram is going to get what they need, to build, a platform like
Not
Instagram.
everyone knows symbolic systems at Stanford. Can you give the one-liner on that?
Yeah, sorry. Just as like, it's interesting because, it's been awesome to see the alumni from some of these programs. But symbolic systems is a kind of a course of study at Stanford that takes in lots of elements of computer science, product design, but also just it almost ends up being like a method of design thinking that has academic rigor and pillars, but is wildly applicable to company creation. And so I like, that work because it feels grounded, in a structured environment. But when you get into kind of application mode, in some of the classes where you actually get to translate things into startups and projects and products that you build, all of a sudden it goes from class project to company, right? And I think that's, a big set of the companies that I've been lucky to invest in my career so far started out looking like class projects, started out as class projects, and they, ended up translating and graduating to full-blown companies like, Mark 43 and others. So that's, and I list that as an example. At MIT, there's the Founder's Journey. This is a class where they invite in practitioners, to consistently, basically inspire entrepreneurs and kind of unfold the path. And one of my colleagues, Hemant, taught that class for a number of years at MIT, and that's how he connected up with the team at Stripe. And so anyway, I would start with the curriculum because that's within the realm of influence, and I like starting there. Second, really quick, I'll try to blaze through
No,
these.
these are great.
But the second is actually, I'll give you one more just 10-second case study on this, which is I think there's often a lot of anxiety to have a very unstructured class that doesn't feel like there's a lot of formal paperwork, grading, formality, and it's going to turn into like the easy A class or whatever. But there are so many ways to structure the selection process for the class. But if you can give folks that time, you know what I mean, that they're covered. And
I'm sure a lot of administrators meet that concept with resistance because it's just not the way things are done. But I think to your point, the air cover, a great phrase for it, to give people time and space to actually tinker.
Yeah.
That's what it takes.
It's super key, it's super key. And I've got personal, experience with this. We had, classes, we had an engineering science class at Harvard that was, it was effectively the startup class, and I got to work on all different, kind of ideas related to venture capital and startups. So anyway, that's really important. I think that the second piece is the on campus, the student groups, and like what is the connectivity that's taking place between students, because I think that's where a lot of the energy also comes from. So enabling, supporting these student groups, just I think universities, and that's one that comes, bottoms up and top down, right? So students can basically identify the need. Hey, we should have a venture capital group, or hey, we should have a computer science society. And then, administration, university resources can see that and help build it up. So hey, we'll call some of the alumni to come back and be speakers for you. Because that's, one great alumni speaker can make all the difference. You know what I mean? I definitely had my mind short-circuited when we had, Dustin Moskovitz, from Facebook, and, he was just getting Asana off the ground. I definitely had my mind short-circuited by spending time with him and just seeing the examples, of his kind of impact in technology. So I think that's the second piece. So finding the way that student groups and the university can meet and amplify each other. I think that's really important. The third is the summer opportunities. And I think you were getting to this point too, which is a number of universities have had infrastructure that, nicely connected Goldman Sachs, with Wharton, right? Like there was that funnel, right? But Office of Career Services is still undergoing a transformation. And I think finding ways to really accelerate and amplify, just the ways to connect the dots to create those experiences is really important, because whether that's, an experience in venture or startups, or at a larger, established technology company, this can make a world of difference. And so that's where it's been exciting to see startups like Way Up in our portfolio and Handshake and others have kind of acted as third-party companies. And Major League Hacking, is another good example. They connect engineers from across campuses with great summer opportunities and hackathons. And so I think an even stronger embrace, I think, of some of those resources. And that's very much taking place on campuses. I find that very encouraging. And that's something I've loved seeing and contributing to. And we actually created a program, at GC a few years ago that was basically connecting great young engineers, with some of our portfolio companies, and just, the success stories that come from it are well worth it.
Peter, you're an incredibly structured thinker. We've talked a few times. It's more obvious now because I'm putting you on the hot seat here with all these questions. How organized are you as a person overall? And I'm asking this for those who are listening, not watching. Behind Peter is a bookshelf color-coded by book. You've got white books, red books, yellow books. Has that been an instrumental part of your success? Even though it may be something you're not thinking about, where does organizational skills play into the path forward for success?
Yeah, that's a really fun question. I think the top level is it's important, I think, to have a system that works for you, right? And for some folks, that's, you should see my desk. You know what I mean? My desk is a different situation, right?
Disaster. Are you like a zero inbox guy? What's your...
I am. Yeah,
Yep.
I am. But I think it's about finding systems that work for you, right? And so for me, I've always been a note taker, right? So, you were, and it's been awesome to see the evolution of tools, and note taking,
What's your favorite tool now? What do you use?
I use Notion for my, written notes. my digital notes, I should say.
Mhm.
I use Airtable for indexing relationships. I use Goodreads for indexing books. I use a physical book for jotting things in person.
I was going to say, do you use paper? I don't use paper.
Oh yes, I've got a stack of notebooks here.
Wow. Do you ever go back and read them? I see people write in these books and it's scribble. There's no way you know what page you wrote something on. You're never going to find that information. It's gone, right?
So, boy, two ways to address this.
Okay.
Number one is, and this is going to sound weird. So this is like everyone can
Don't worry, go for it. Yeah.
Writing and reading have always had a distinctive positive feeling to me, and so I would do it. If you told me at the end of my notebook, you were going to burn it, I would still take the process of populating, because the feeling for me is positive, and it's always been with me. I had these lists from when I was a kid and all that jazz. I just graph paper, line notebooks, all that jazz. So that's one. But two is, I actually think the ability to process information, you know what I mean? It's totally leveled up when you do the notes, whether it's written. I think written is a little bit more impactful and effective in terms of memory recall. But I mean, I also have a tough time remembering things, and there's nothing that has, higher fidelity and integrity, so to speak, than oh my gosh, I actually wrote that down. I don't have to, did I say that? Did she say that? You know what I mean? I actually indexed it. And I do have a little bit of a routine where I do periodically review my notes. I'm also a big decision journal person. So when I make decisions around investments, I love capturing, you know what I mean? The moment, because it's so easy to rewrite history. You know what I mean? You could, I always knew that industry was going to be a big deal and but it's well, do you actually have the notes to prove it? So
have you gone back and been hard on yourself because you knew something and you passed on it, or you made a stupid bet? There's so much regret in the venture industry, right? Because if you're in the game we're in and you're seeing lots of good opportunities, you're not doing them all. And everyone that gets away, you feel horrible about. Do you go back to the notes, reinforce that? Do they give you peace of mind?
Yeah, it's honestly, and I'm sure this is going to change for me over time. And I love this. I love this question and thinking about this, because I think there have definitely been times where I'm just ridiculously hard on myself, and I'm just kind of geez Louise, you know what I mean? Should have pushed a little bit harder, further, blah, 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 blah. I think the thing that I find solace in, so to speak, is distilling the learnings so that hopefully in the future it doesn't happen again. Because we can influence the road ahead of us. And if we take the time to actually distill the learnings from the past and ensure to equip ourselves, this is why I love the idea of having a very robust and organized and structured process around thinking about your anti-portfolio. You know what I mean? And, Charlie Munger's, you know what I mean? The errors of omission. I fundamentally believe that that's really good sources of learning. Not the shame and the guilt and the emotional part, which definitely, you know what I mean? Especially earlier on in my career, I was overwhelmed and flooded with that. You know what I mean? I was oh my God, how did I not do that? But just distilling the key learnings and just keep going, because hopefully, and this is, my hope, they compound. The lessons compound over time. You know what I mean? And there's going to be an ever abundance of opportunity. It's just can you be prepared and try to recognize it the next time you're there? And it's never going to be perfect. So,
do you have any tactics or skills? And this is something I've struggled with over time, for letting go of the regret, getting out of the rut when you fucked up? Because when you're playing a volume game, you're going to make mistakes, right? We all do them. How do you forgive yourself? How do you let go and focus on the future? What you just said, your method sounds fantastic. I think it's very hard in practice.
No, trust me. And I'm, again, I'm an ever student and ever practitioner and ever imperfect. So, I'm sure there's a tremendous amount that I can learn from you in your career in this process. The things, and I'm always trying to absorb and learn from seeing what's working for others. The things that have worked for me. So this is going to sound a little unusual, but it's I have to try to get it right on the people. I think that the most profound pain that I've felt is when I got it wrong on the people, or I didn't follow through on my passion and conviction on the people. So that was a discovery for me, for what it's worth. Because I find that markets change, technologies change,
You're a team
they're
investor.
exogenous. Yeah, there are all these exogenous factors, you know what I mean, that you just can't control, but you can pick the people. And I think people can get better with time, and they can compound and improve. And I love that. And I don't have any regrets of being in business with incredible people for which things didn't work out. I have no. So that's one set that I just have erased. You know what I mean? You can predict, that market was going to evaporate. No harm, no foul.
But you can forgive yourself if they were the right people.
Yes.
For the people listening, there was a business school case study I did in my venture capital class, just taught by a few VCs here in New York. And they gave you 3 companies that were anonymized. And one had an incredible technology or a barrier. One had a great market. One had a great team. And a lot of detail on each one. And you're supposed to read all 3 and pick one. Now, it turns out all 3 were real companies that were massive successes, massive public companies. And they're trying to force us to suss out what type of investor we were going to be. Mm-hmm. So when Peter's saying he's a team investor, that is a category of VC. When you get a bunch of VCs in the room, even in the same firm, you'll have a team investor, you'll have a market investor, you'll have different profiles, different lenses that people look through.
Totally.
So can we switch to General Catalyst? We've talked about the firm a couple times through this, but I don't know if everyone knows it. I mean, it is one of the predominant institutions on the East Coast. It's a phenomenal firm. You guys are involved with tons of great deals. Can you give a little overview of General Catalyst for everyone listening?
Yeah, absolutely. So GC is a firm founded in 2000, initially headquartered in Boston, that in the last 20 years has expanded to New York, Palo Alto, San Francisco, $8 billion under management, and is a venture firm that is dedicated to backing incredible companies that want to have an enduring positive impact. And so that's the ethos and the core of GC. We do everywhere from early stage to later stage investments. And the goal is to be able to meet founders wherever they are in their journey of building and scaling their company. So that involves seed investments, that involves $100 million investments, and we invest across the spectrum of industries. So whether that's healthcare, financial services, consumer. And so, the team is, I couldn't have, been more lucky, to find a group of folks to learn from and to work alongside and to be partners alongside. So that's a little bit about GCs. We're lucky to be investors in Airbnb and Snap and Lemonade and Stripe and companies like Row and a number of others. And again, I think that the common theme and the common goal is to find entrepreneurs that want to build enduring software companies that have a positive impact.
Now, is there a way you guys get involved? Firms with a lot of capital will often put more weight on larger investments, so Series B, C, D rounds. Or there's other firms out there that will try to do every dollar into the company at every round because that's the only way to put the money to work. So they'll try to grab it at the A, but not syndicate. Do the whole B, do the whole C. Not syndicate, for everyone listening, is when you have a bunch of other investors participate in the investment with you. Is there a model that GC uses to manage $8 billion? That's a fairly large sum of capital for a venture firm to be managing.
Yeah. We work in teams and we collaborate across stages. And to be honest, I wish I could tell you that there was one particular method, because I don't think founders, would fit into that recipe and fit into that equation. But what we do is, we have a very healthy, set of investing across all these different stages and increasingly all across geographies to meet these incredible founders where they are. So, and we like to be collaborative. We like to be collaborative not only internally, where we all just there isn't territorial kind of fiefdoms and politics and all that jazz, which is easy to have emerge amongst a partnership. But we also love collaborating with other firms, right? And sometimes that takes place in the context of seed, so co-leading a seed investment, with another firm and not being, sharp elbows. Like that's a concept, that I think about all the time, which is you can choose to have sharp elbows and be near-term greedy, But what that does to your relationships, your reputation, and your long-term returns, I think ultimately, becomes a little bit
Not a
complicated,
long game.
right?
It's not a long game in adventure.
And I think the second piece is, it's founders, you know what I mean, want to and get to choose who they work with, right? And so I think it's very easy to think, venture investors get to make all the decisions, but it's really at the end of the day, a founder gets to choose, what collection of people, what brand, what they want to be associated with. And so we meet, those founders, and when it makes sense for us to do the entire round or a part of the round, you know what I mean? Like, we work with them. But I would say, and each of us also has, I think, different styles, right? For what it's worth, I love syndicating, and opportunities, because I think two heads are oftentimes better than one, right? And it's just, I think, working together with other venture investors that you respect and admire and like to work alongside, one of the things you do is you just get into a rhythm of collaborating and co-investing together. And you work on basically making the pie, so to speak, or the opportunity, the overall opportunity size bigger than it would have been on your own, right? That's what constantly goes through my mind. And so that's where, a number of the investments, I've made have just been alongside other
How does the team get segmented? Are you guys segmented by stage, by industry, by geography? And what sub-segment do you fit into?
Yeah, well, I'm easy. I'm supporting founders at the earliest part of their journey. So that means, pre-seed through Series A, right? So I want to be the first, the first partner to
that makes
founders
total
that are getting off the
sense,
ground.
given
So
rough draft and everything you've done.
Exactly. So I love that. And for me, I've got a little bit of a geographic flavor just because, I care tremendously about New York and the East Coast, and it's where I grew up. It's where my network and relationships, it's where I walk down the street, bump into people and realize, I should catch up with them. And that leads to an investment. So that serendipity comes from a certain amount of density and network connectivity. And I also think about just building up more technology ecosystems, right? Because I think, to use whether, you want to use San Francisco or another ecosystem, I think every city, you know what I mean, I think should have, as thriving and vibrant a technology community, because that's the world we're going to inherit, you know what I mean? And it's only a matter of time. And so I've really enjoyed, playing a very small role and just seeing New York kind of build up and compound in the way that it is now. So I've got that, I've got a little bit of that hometown, kind of pride going on. But to answer your question, I mean, we want to get the right group of folks in front of any founder, you know what I mean, that makes sense. So that cuts across, to your point, sectors, stage.
There's got to be some sort of structure within where they know their job description is their East Coast growth, or there's got to be some sort of organization. It's not chaos within the walls of GC.
Certainly not chaos. No. We have practices. We have strategy practice groups. And so seed, early stage, growth, and endurance, those represent basically all the stage that a company can go through. And then
I'm sure you have pools of capital allocated to each. And
I think more importantly, we also have individual investors that spike and are passionate about and have a point of view around different areas. So late stage consumer, this person has a tremendous amount of knowledge and expertise. Early stage, enterprise, Tel Aviv, you know what I mean? So, but it does end up being, and that's why I say we end up working across these groups though, because you may have someone with incredible fintech expertise that typically is doing, more growth stage investments, but they're definitely going to have a point of view on an early stage idea. So that's where we do some remixing, you know what I mean? And that's where a little bit of the alchemy kind of happens.
Got it.
To get the right subgroups together.
What has set GC apart from other firms? When you think about what makes the firm special, and everyone has an answer that's different for their firm, what is GC's unique angle, position, secret sauce? What is it for you guys?
Yeah, boy, I have to answer this in the way that I've felt through my, 8 years at GC. This collection of people is profound, and it's gotten better with time, and it gets better, every year. I think it starts there. I know, as cliche or trivial as that answer may sound, but at the end of the day, capital, is a commodity, and increasingly so in our industry. It's about the people that you work with, and it's not as trite as, do I want to have a beer with them? That's not what I'm talking about. It's like, I'm going to be interfacing and collaborating with this person for 10 years if I'm a founder, right? It matters a lot to pick the people. And I think the group of investors in our partnership at GC is just incredible. And I think the part of what brings that together and stitches it together is just this reminder of like what we're in service of. I think there's this incredible service mindset that our partner Ken Chanel, echoes and amplifies, and is really, I think, the stitching in all of us, which is we're in service to LPs, we're in service to founders. This isn't about, any one of us. This isn't just about returns. There's an actual service. I mean, scholarships are actually going to, take place, at really important philanthropic institutions by doing this work. And founders are going to live their dreams and have an impact in the communities that matter to them because of this work. And so I think those are the two.
I like that language. We think of the venture business as a service business. And when you have that mindset and you start treating everyone like customers, I think it gives the firms a chance to thrive. So that language resonates with me personally. How do you see GC evolving? Are you guys, it's a big ship at this point. Is this the destination?
No, it's interesting. When I think back, so I joined the team to open our New York office, right? So to talk about kind of, evolving and evolution. Because it was super clear, that GC's ambitions, were worldwide. And I wanted to be a part of helping and contributing the way that I could. I've always had my little Metro card, ready to go. So, and it's interesting. I reflect on that moment a lot because I got a lot of conflicting advice from mentors and from folks that are like, oh my gosh, if you want to do this for real, you have to go to XYZ city, you know what I mean? Blah, 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 blah. But I was like, no, New York, it's definitely going to be, if nothing else, personally fulfilling. But now looking back, it's turned into such a powerful ecosystem. So, and so many cities, are going to transform and are currently transforming, which I'm excited about. So I would say, every year, we run a set of experiments and pilots and do things new. There is no qualms or concerns, about that, saying, oh, hey, this is what's worked for us in the past, so we have to keep doing it. That's not the way the organization works. So every year it's iteration, expansion, and just huge ambition. I think even in the last 2 years, a lot of what I described to you didn't exist. And then 8 years ago, it just, we didn't have these offices, we didn't have this team, we didn't have all these strategies. And so the firm's constantly evolving, and I'm super grateful to have played my little part with Rough Draft and with New York and seed investing, but the firm is, it's definitely, I think, to your point, in order to meet founders as our customers where they are, we have to diversify and constantly evolve the offering, right? Because the second the offering becomes stale, right, it's just that's not going to work. So anyway, constantly, huge ambitions.
Now, one interesting thing about General Catalyst that I think I have right, tell me if I'm incorrect, it's probably the only venture fund that has an Academy Award. Is that correct?
Boy, that strikes me as correct. No, we've got, it comes back to the people, our partner, David Fialco, is just a...
Can you tell the story on that? Because I think I know the story, but I probably have it wrong, and I think everyone else would like to hear it.
Yeah, David is one of the rarest people you'll meet. He's a big part of the reason why I think many of us chose to be at GC, and he's been an incredible mentor over the years. I have this memory, basically sitting with him at the Crosby Street Hotel, and he's like, "Hey, did you read the cover of the New York Times?" I'm like, "Not yet." This is like 7 a.m, which is
right.
when he's having breakfast at the Crosby. I'm like, I got up, did my thing, and came here. I haven't read the
right.
And long story short, his work on Icarus, the documentary about the basically the Russian kind of just doping scandal around the Olympics, and so
that knocked them out of the Olympics. That documentary.
Yes, exactly. And so anyway, that the punchline is, there was a fair amount of time where there was a lot of news and honestly just like impact and outcomes. You know what I mean? Not just an incredible piece of film, right? Which is just, incredibly illuminating, but actually there were, ramifications for basically improving the sportsmanship and the conduct. And so anyway, that's the story,
And you guys, did the firm fund it or your partner wrote the check personally?
It is David Fialko's special. It is.
Got it. So it's his Academy Award, not General Catalyst. But I think you need to have it in the halls of the office because that is a shocking random, element.
We have had it make appearances at our office, our portfolio companies, and so. Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it's not just a movie; it's a movie that had a historical consequence. People haven't seen Icarus; it's a documentary. I watched it on Netflix. I don't know if it's still on there, but very fascinating, worth a watch. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you interned at Bad Boy Entertainment earlier in your career.
Good Lord, Mark.
That sounds like a whole conversation we might need to delve into.
Yeah.
And if I'm also not mistaken, for folks who want to follow Peter on Twitter, he is Bad Boy Boyce, and that is his handle. Is there a relationship between the internship and the handle? And we are blushing for our third time, folks.
Yeah, geez Louise, Mark. I got to tell you, this is like one of my dinner table party conversations, because
Okay.
I'm like normally a pretty straightforward, boring, I like to read and, travel.
Yeah, I wouldn't usually put Bad Boy and physics in the same conversation.
Nope, most folks don't. No, I did.
Color-coded bookshelves.
Yeah, no, I did. I love hip hop. I love music. I grew up, kind of fascinated by the careers of folks like Notorious B.I.G. and Biggie. And the work that Bad Boy and Diddy had and all of that, I was fascinated by. So it's actually, for what it's worth, I made my handle when I was working there. You did. Okay. I had a project related to Diddy's Twitter accounts, and lo and behold, I was like, oh, I should probably test things out on my account before I, start playing around with.
It's a good handle. You can't drop it now. Right?
No, I've had the opportunity to, BBB.
It's branded. People know it's you.
Yeah, but it's always, it's fun because, I'll get an email or something. Someone will say, P.S. love your Twitter handle. And it just kind of.
It's great.
And then I have other folks that tell me.
It's great. You got to have a little fun. You can't be professional every minute,
Exactly. Yeah, trust me. So
all right. You've alluded to this a little bit through the conversation. I'm going to let you off the hook on the Twitter handle. You're welcome. You've alluded to this a little bit through the conversation, and I think it's a macro trend that you and I are not the only people seeing. It's the atomization of Silicon Valley. All the innovation was happening there and very little anywhere else until probably about 20 years ago. And it feels like it's materially accelerating now, particularly with COVID. Work from home is changing it, where we don't need to be co-located in the same 50 blocks to access capital, access talent, build great companies. You've talked about New York, and then you brought it to the East Coast. We're hearing a lot of talk about Miami right now. And for those who are listening, I'm a New Yorker, and I'm building the New York ecosystem, but invest nationally, right? What is the trend we're seeing? Do you think it's permanent? What happens to Silicon Valley? Mm-hmm. Where does all this go from your lens?
Yeah, So first off, I would say there's a book, called The Rainforest that I think is a really great read. And it's basically unpacks fundamental units and properties of ecosystems, of professional ecosystems. And I think it does a really great job of distilling the necessary ingredients, or like the ingredients that basically create for a thriving, technology ecosystem. And there's nothing in that precludes any city from becoming a technology ecosystem. There's nothing. There's no, and in fact, if anything, I've loved this book among others, but I think anyone that read this, and was playing a partner industry could basically bring some of those insights and some of those lessons and start re-engineering their environments in whatever city they are to encourage and foster and accelerate. I think the way I think about this question, Mark, because I think about it a lot, it has to do with its timeline. It has to do with time. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, right? San Francisco has a head start. That's the way to think about it. It's not, it's literally like, I think it's just an example of just, a different part of the timeline. And every city, I think, is going to get there to some varying degree, should they want to, and should the people in those communities want to, right? We came to do this in New York, you know what I mean? Or like we grew up, like this is what we wanted to do. So I'm hoping that we're doing something to, basically accelerate that timeline, right? So anyway, I'm really encouraged because I think, technology communities and cities, that embrace the fact that this is our future are going to be healthier. You know what I mean? They're going to be very productive. It's where people are going to be generating their livelihood, right? And I think we're seeing, the last year has been a forcing function on this, but it's been tried and true for, years, many years before that. You can build really successful companies and venture firms in many, many, many different places. And yes, there are certain starting advantages and certain densities that you can take advantage of when you're in one of these ecosystems. But I think we've to your point, we've seen that can be many places. So I'm excited for more folks to basically raise their hands and say, hey, we're going to will this into existence. That's what's taking place with Miami right now, right? Like, I love it. Great. Let's will it into existence. Austin, Texas. Let's will it into existence. That's awesome. I love that. I think that, there are, for what it's worth, I think important things to trace back to in terms of thinking about what are some of the elements, though, that, maybe harder influence or maybe kind of harder to engineer, or they're going to take longer time. And that's where I think folks, maybe are or are not paying enough attention to. And this is where I go back to university ecosystems. Having a dense university ecosystem, or being one of the flight paths, so to speak, where great university talent flows, I think is crucial, right? I mean, that was crucial for, putting Boston, into business. I think it's crucial to New York having, great universities like we do here. I think that's going to be, one of the interesting elements too, is just, who are the communities and cities that are going to do bold, interesting things to say, hey, oh my gosh, like, start your career with us. And there's certain lifestyle questions or lifestyle aspects of some of these cities, Miami.
And people have families where they've had families, right? They want to have a career where their family is.
Exactly. Family, temperature, real estate prices, all that jazz. But it'll just be interesting to see. I think that's one of the ones that I'm excited about too, because I think there's like this awesome opportunity for like an open call to be like the router, you know what I mean? Like route into our city, to get your career jump started. I think companies can play that role. I think venture firms can play that role. But it'll be exciting to see.
That's amazing. I believe it's a global phenomenon at this point. I'm very encouraged to see the whole, mankind transforming
for sure
by having better innovation cycles.
Absolutely. I was just
more distributed.
I was just down in Colombia, just a few weeks ago. I mean, the innovation that's taking place in Bogota and Medellin. I mean, companies like Rappi, that are scaling and growing, and they're going to create, a wave of entrepreneurs that want to go and start their own companies because they all learned at one place. And so
I love it. And on that note, I'd like to flip it a little bit and ask you a question to help everyone listening learn. What is the most important advice you can give to an entrepreneur at this point? Now, you haven't been in the entrepreneurial hot seat, but you've supported a lot of folks, seen a lot of stuff, probably learned a lot through osmosis, through the things your partners are experiencing. Mm-hmm. If you could give some nuggets of advice that maybe people haven't already heard, what would you offer?
Yeah. And I'm glad you kind of, set the context that way. Because I'll perpetually be learning on this front. There are, and we don't need to talk about the failed startups that I was a part of in college. That's neither here nor there. But
I have a longer list than you, my friend.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
Yeah. But I think so. One, and this is I think one of Fortune's formulas for sure, which is assemble the best group of people around you that's possible. That is Fortune's formula, and you could be starting a nonprofit, a for-profit, a startup, a student group or whatever, but just you have to assemble incredible people around you that are going to complement you. And just that is, I mean, people are the fundamental units of what we're trying to do in this industry. I think it's easy to forget that. It's easy to lose sight of that. But that's when I've seen success compound over time, when I've seen success accumulate over time, it starts with that. And that's why, I believe in trying to get the people right, at all costs. I'll take all the other risks, you know what I mean? But just great people. So that's, and I think, tactically that just be the thoughtful and the intentionality, and almost just like a relentless precision in hiring. You know what I mean? Like that's just, I think, key.
There's something I suggest to entrepreneurs on that note, something I call the Superman analysis. I have them write down all of the skills, capabilities they need when they're starting the company to make the company work. I need someone who can sell, someone who can do tech, product, make the whole list. Check the boxes that they have, and relentlessly, to use your word, hire to fill the rest.
Totally. So
I find it helps people focus.
Yeah, I think, I would focus on that. That's, I think, everything else, if I'm ever going to share a second piece of advice for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, please.
It has to do with, this piece around learning, sources of learning. I've got to tell you, the learning from founders that are 2 stages ahead of you is one of the most tried and true, persistent sources of cheat codes and insights that I've ever seen for any entrepreneur. If you're seed stage, have 3 friends that have Series B companies that you're constantly in dialogue with, learning from, because they've made in recent memory some of the choices that you're going to make, and they'll tell you some of the potholes and some of the great decisions they made. So that's, and that I can go down that list, but just the sources of learning and the constant, I use that expression, learning machine, all the time. It's just, that is crucial, right? And I think the moment we decide that we have all the answers or we don't need to learn anymore, that's the stagnation, formula.
That's the end.
So, yeah. So those are the 2 things I think about the most core and critical.
That's fantastic. Peter, you're the real deal. Thank you for taking the time. This is fantastic. And there's a lot of great insights for folks here. And look forward to working with you and seeing you around town once this pandemic is over.
You know it. Mark, thanks so much for having me and sharing the time.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks.
I'm very grateful to Peter for taking the time to share his experiences with us. I think his perspective is particularly relevant for student entrepreneurs and aspiring VCs. If you like what you heard, please hook us up with a like or a 5-star review, and feel free to share with a friend. You can find me on Twitter at MPD. To hear more of my conversations with innovators, subscribe on YouTube, Facebook, or any major podcast platform. Just search for Innovation with Mark Peter Davis.